In the gleaming heart of Milan's fashion district, where dreams of stardom float like perfume in the air, a seemingly ordinary cafe scene was about to transform into something far more sinister. Anya Taylor-Joy sat quietly at her corner table, her untouched cappuccino growing cold as she observed the predator at work. To anyone else, William Phillips looked like any other modeling scout, expensive watch, designer blazer, and a practiced smile that had likely convinced countless young girls they were about to become the next big thing. But Anya wasn't anyone else. 6 months of careful investigation had led her to this moment, watching as Phillips chatted with another potential victim, Sophia Mitchell, barely 15, stars in her eyes and hope in her heart. The same hope Phillips had used to lure dozens of other girls into his elaborate scheme. The fashionable cafe buzzed with the usual afternoon crowd, the perfect cover for what was about to unfold. Anya's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup, her acute awareness masked by a carefully cultivated air of disinterest. Her own modeling background had taught her the art of being seen without being noticed, a skill that had served her well in her current mission. Phillips leaned forward, his voice carrying just enough to reach Anya's trained ears. "You have exactly what the industry is looking for right now," he was saying to Sophia, whose parents sat nearby, equally enchanted by his smooth promises. "I can make you a star within 6 months. Milan, Paris, New York, they'll all want you." The same words, the same script he had used on Isabella Clarke last month, and on Olivia Green before that. Both girls had disappeared for weeks, only to return with hollow eyes and broken spirits, too traumatized to speak about what had happened to them. But the evidence was there, buried in offshore accounts and hidden properties, in the trail of broken lives Phillips had left across 3 continents. Anya took another sip of her cold coffee, remembering her own early days in the industry. She had been one of the lucky ones, protected by legitimate agents and experienced mentors. But for every success story like hers, there were dozens of cautionary tales, young lives derailed by predators like Phillips who saw teenage dreams as commodities to be exploited. The investigation had started with a tip from Emma Roberts, a veteran makeup artist who had noticed something off about the girls Phillips represented. The way they flinched at sudden movements, how they avoided eye contact, the strange bruises explained away as modeling accidents. Emma had reached out to Anya, knowing her influence in the industry and her quiet dedication to protecting vulnerable newcomers. Phillips was now showing Sophia's parents a portfolio of his supposed success stories. Anya recognized the photos. They were stolen from legitimate agencies, the names changed, the stories fabricated. His phone buzzed, and he excused himself to take a call, stepping away from the table but keeping his eyes on his potential prey. The moment Phillips moved, Anya noticed Michael Turner enter the cafe. To the casual observer, he looked like any other businessman taking a late lunch break. But he was part of her team, one of several investigators positioned throughout the area. Another operative, Charlotte Anderson, sat at the bar, pretending to work on her laptop while documenting every move Phillips made. Sophia's mother, Olivia Mitchell, radiated pride as she watched her daughter examine the glossy portfolio. Anya's heart ached, knowing how close this family was to falling into Phillips's trap. The scout had refined his approach over the years. He no longer rushed, no longer made obvious mistakes. He groomed not just the girls but their entire families, building trust before springing his trap. The evidence they had gathered was substantial but not yet complete. Bank records showing suspicious transfers, testimonies from former victims willing to speak anonymously, surveillance footage of Phillips meeting with known trafficking facilitators. But they needed more. They needed to catch him in the act, to build a case so solid that he couldn't slip away again. Phillips returned to the table, his practiced charm in full force. "I have some contracts here," he said, pulling out official-looking documents. "Standard industry forms. If you're interested, we could start the process today." His smile didn't reach his eyes as he added, "I have another meeting in Paris tomorrow. Several major houses are looking for fresh faces. If we move quickly, Sophia could be part of that presentation." The urgency in his pitch was subtle but clear, a pressure tactic Anya had seen him use before. Create a sense of opportunity slipping away, push for quick decisions, isolate the target from those who might offer warning or wisdom. It was textbook predator behavior, refined through years of practice. What Phillips didn't know was that his Paris meeting wasn't with fashion houses, it was with Lucas Hall, another trafficker currently under investigation by authorities in 3 countries. The pieces were falling into place, but timing was crucial. One wrong move, one premature action, and Phillips would disappear again, only to resurface later with a new identity and new victims. Anya's phone vibrated silently, a message from James Nelson, her contact in law enforcement. The surveillance team had confirmed Phillips's next moves, the private car waiting around the corner, the hotel room booked under a false name. The same pattern he had used before, but this time, they were ready. As Phillips walked the Mitchell family through the contracts, Anya observed Sophia's father, William Mitchell, ask pertinent questions about insurance, travel arrangements, and chaperones. Phillips had answers for everything, each response carefully crafted to sound legitimate while concealing sinister intentions. The afternoon light was fading, casting long shadows through the cafe's windows. Phillips was now showing them photos on his phone, images of luxury apartments where his girls stayed during fashion weeks. Anya knew those apartments existed, but not for the purposes he claimed. They were gilded cages, places where dreams turned to nightmares. Another message buzzed on Anya's phone. Everything was in place. The next 24 hours would determine whether Phillips's operation would finally be exposed, whether justice would come for all the girls who had suffered in silence. But first, she had to ensure the Mitchell family didn't sign those contracts. As Phillips reached for his pen, Anya stood quietly, her movement causing her chair to scrape slightly against the floor. The sound drew Phillips's attention for just a moment, and in that brief glance, recognition flickered across his face. He had seen her before in magazine spreads and on runways, but more importantly, he had seen her 2 months ago outside his lawyer's office, though she had looked very different then. The color drained from his face as he realized who she was, what her presence might mean. But ever the professional, he maintained his composure, turning back to the Mitchells with only a slight tremor in his hands. "Shall we make this official?" he asked, his voice steady despite the beads of sweat now forming on his forehead. Anya moved purposefully toward the door, knowing Phillips was watching her every move. The game was entering its final phase, but the real confrontation was yet to come. As she stepped out into the Milan evening, she could feel the tension building, the pieces moving into place for what would become one of the fashion industry's most shocking exposés. The predator was about to become the prey, but first, they had to ensure no more innocent dreams would be shattered, no more young lives derailed. The next few hours would change everything, not just for Phillips, but for every victim who had suffered in silence, every family that had been deceived, and every young aspiring model who deserved a safe path to their dreams. The golden light of Milan's evening had given way to the soft glow of street lamps as Anya made her way through the fashion district's winding streets. Behind her, she knew William Phillips would be rushing to salvage his operation, making frantic calls to his network of conspirators. The Mitchell family remained in the cafe, their unsigned contracts a silent testament to the evening's interrupted transaction. Charlotte Anderson's voice came through Anya's earpiece, calm and professional. "Phillips is packing up. He's making a call, seems agitated." The surveillance team had the cafe covered from every angle, watching as their target's carefully constructed facade began to crack. Years of investigating fashion industry trafficking rings had taught them that this was the most dangerous moment, when predators felt cornered. The real work had begun 6 months ago, when Emma Roberts had first approached Anya with her suspicions. The makeup artist had noticed patterns. Young girls arriving for shoots with vacant expressions, suspicious bruises, and stories that didn't quite add up. Emma had kept detailed records, dates, names, locations, creating a web of evidence that pointed to a sophisticated trafficking operation hiding behind the legitimate fashion industry. Anya's phone buzzed with a message from Michael Turner. "Target moving. Heading east on Via Monte Napoleon." Phillips was taking his usual route back to the Hotel Benjamin, where he kept a permanent suite under the name James Wright. What he didn't know was that every security camera along his path was now feeding directly to their command center, monitored by Lucas Hall and his team of cyber investigators. The investigation had revealed a complex network. Phillips wasn't working alone. He was part of a larger organization that used modeling agencies as fronts for their trafficking operations. They had identified at least 3 other scouts working similar schemes: Henry Green in Paris, Alexander Scott in London, and William Carter in New York. Each operated independently but followed the same playbook, targeting young girls with dreams of stardom. Sophia Mitchell had been their latest potential victim, but she wouldn't be their last unless they could shut down the entire operation. The evidence they had gathered painted a disturbing picture: offshore accounts funneling millions through shell companies, private properties in remote locations, and a client list that included some of the most powerful names in several industries. Anya's path took her past the gleaming windows of luxury boutiques, their displays showcasing the legitimate side of the fashion world she had once called home. Her own modeling career had opened doors that allowed her to pursue this mission, to protect others from the darker corners of the industry she loved. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her face still appeared on some of these very billboards, while she worked in shadows to expose its hidden predators. Isabella Clarke's testimony had been the turning point in their investigation. The young model had managed to escape Phillips's operation 3 months ago, and though traumatized, she had found the courage to share her story. Her detailed account of how Phillips and his associates operated had provided the blueprint for their current operation. "Phillips has made 3 calls in the last 5 minutes," Charlotte's voice reported through the earpiece. 2 to burner phones, 1 to a number we've traced to Noah Robinson. Robinson was a known facilitator, a middleman who arranged transportation for Phillips's victims under the guise of modeling assignments. They had been building a case against him for months. The pieces were falling into place, but timing was crucial. They needed Phillips to lead them to his meeting with the larger network. Intelligence suggested a major gathering was planned for the following night, a fashion showcase that was actually a front for their trafficking operations. Guest lists had been carefully cultivated, security arranged, and young models recruited from across Europe. Anya checked her watch, the same elegant timepiece that had been a gift from her first legitimate modeling contract. In less than 24 hours, they would have their chance to expose the entire operation. But first, they needed to ensure the Mitchell family remained safe and unaware of their role in the larger investigation. James Nelson's team had already arranged for a legitimate modeling agent, Olivia Turner, to, coincidentally, meet the Mitchells tomorrow morning. She would offer Sophia a genuine opportunity, steering the family away from Phillips's clutches while maintaining their surveillance operation. It was a delicate balance, protecting potential victims while gathering enough evidence to dismantle the trafficking network. "Target has entered the hotel," Michael's voice confirmed. "He's making a beeline for the elevator. Harrison's team is in position on the 10th floor." Harrison, whose real name was Benjamin Baker, led the technical surveillance unit. They had spent weeks mapping every inch of Phillips's suite, planning for this moment. The night air carried the faint scent of jasmine from nearby gardens as Anya made her way to their command center, housed in an unmarked building just blocks from the hotel. Inside, screens displayed various camera feeds, document scans, and surveillance photos. The evidence of Phillips's operation was overwhelming when viewed in its entirety. Emma Roberts was waiting inside, her usual makeup artist's bag replaced with folders of evidence she had meticulously gathered. "The Mitchells are safely home," she reported. "Our team is keeping watch, just in case Phillips tries to make contact." They had learned from experience that traffickers often had backup plans, alternative ways to reach their intended victims. The command center hummed with quiet activity as analysts processed new information. Sophia Anderson, their cybersecurity expert, was tracking Phillips's digital footprint, monitoring his communications and financial transactions in real time. The operation had taken months to set up, involving cooperation from law enforcement agencies across 3 continents. Movement on the 10th floor, Harrison's voice crackled through the communications system. "Phillips is shredding documents. Looks like our presence at the cafe spooked him." This was expected. Phillips had a history of destroying evidence when he felt threatened. But what he didn't know was that every document in his possession had already been digitally copied through the hotel's compromised security system. Anya studied the surveillance feeds, watching Phillips pace in his suite. His confident facade had cracked, revealing the desperate predator beneath. She thought of all the young girls whose lives he had damaged, whose dreams he had twisted into nightmares. The fashion industry had been her salvation, her path to independence and success. For too many others, it had become a trap, a way for traffickers like Phillips to exploit young aspirations. New message intercepted, Sophia announced from her station. Phillips is moving up his timeline. The showcase has been rescheduled for tomorrow afternoon instead of evening. This was a complication. They had planned their operation around the original schedule. Now they would need to adjust, to move faster while maintaining their careful surveillance. Emma walked over to Anya's station, her expression concerned. We can't let him change the venue. All our surveillance equipment, our teams. She didn't need to finish the thought. Months of planning could unravel if Phillips managed to relocate his operation. But Anya saw an opportunity in this development. He's scared, she observed, watching Phillips continue his agitated pacing. Scared people make mistakes. We can use this. She had seen it before. When traffickers felt cornered, they often took risks, broke their usual patterns in ways that made them vulnerable. The next few hours would be crucial. They needed to maintain pressure on Phillips without revealing their full operation. The predator had to believe he still had a chance to salvage his plans, to continue his operations. Only then would he lead them to his entire network. Anya's phone buzzed with a message from Isabella Clark. More girls coming forward. They're ready to talk. The dam was beginning to break. Phillips's former victims, seeing a chance for justice, were finding their voices. Each testimony added another piece to their case, another nail in the trafficker's coffin. The command center's atmosphere was charged with purpose as teams coordinated their next moves. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation they had planned for months, but tonight was about preparation, about ensuring every detail was in place. They had one chance to get this right, to protect not just Sophia Mitchell, but every potential victim these predators might target. As midnight approached, Anya watched Phillips finally collapse into a chair, his expensive suit wrinkled, his confident demeanor shattered. Tomorrow he would try to rebuild his facade, to continue his terrible work. But tomorrow would bring a very different kind of showcase, one that would expose the dark underbelly of the fashion industry's most notorious trafficking ring. Dawn broke over Milan's skyline as Anya reviewed the final preparations for their operation. The hastily rescheduled showcase had forced them to accelerate their timeline, but it had also created unexpected opportunities. Phillips's fear had made him sloppy. In the past 6 hours, he had made dozens of calls to his associates, each one carefully recorded and traced by their surveillance team. The location for the showcase remained unchanged, Villa Isabella, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Milan owned by one of Phillips's shell companies under the name Lucas Wright. The villa's opulent facade masked its true purpose as a processing center for trafficking victims. Behind its manicured gardens and security gates, countless young lives had been forever altered. 12 potential victims confirmed for today's event, Charlotte Anderson reported, sliding a tablet across the command center's main table. The screen displayed photographs of young girls, most of them between 14 and 17, all recruited under the pretense of a prestigious modeling opportunity. Among them was Sophia Mitchell's photo, though thanks to their intervention, she would never attend. Emma Roberts had spent the early morning hours coordinating with their network of legitimate modeling agencies. Each of the girls' families would receive genuine opportunities, steered away from Phillips's clutches without compromising the investigation. It was a delicate balance, protecting potential victims while maintaining surveillance on the trafficking operation. Phillips made contact with his primary financier. Michael Turner announced from his monitoring station. William Robinson just landed at Malpensa Airport. He's heading straight to the villa. Robinson was a key target, the money man behind multiple trafficking operations across Europe. His presence confirmed the showcase's true nature. Anya studied the villa's layout on the massive screen dominating the command center's wall. They had spent weeks mapping every entrance, exit, and security measure. Benjamin Hall's team had even managed to plant cameras throughout the property, disguised as ordinary maintenance upgrades. Now those same cameras showed increased activity as staff, many of them unwitting participants in Phillips's scheme, prepared for the afternoon's events. Isabella Clarke's testimony has been formally recorded, James Nelson reported, entering the command center with fresh files. She's safe in protective custody, along with 3 other survivors who came forward overnight. The girls' courage in speaking out had strengthened their case immeasurably, providing crucial details about the operation's inner workings. The morning progressed with military precision as teams moved into position around Villa Isabella. Olivia Green and Noah Baker, posing as catering staff, had already infiltrated the property. Their body cameras provided real-time footage of the villa's interior, confirming the presence of private security, men whose backgrounds suggested connections to international criminal organizations. At 10 o'clock, Phillips emerged from his hotel, the previous night's dishevelment replaced by his usual polished appearance. But surveillance footage revealed the cracks in his facade, hands that wouldn't stop fidgeting, constant glances over his shoulder, the way he changed his route 3 times on the way to his car. He's making one last recruiting attempt. Charlotte's voice crackled through the communication system, approaching a girl outside the fashion academy. Their team watched as Phillips introduced himself to young Amelia Turner. His practiced smile masks the desperation in his eyes. But they had prepared for this. Within minutes, one of their undercover officers, posing as the girl's uncle, appeared to escort her away. The magnitude of Phillips's operation became clearer with each passing hour. Financial records decrypted by their tech team revealed a network spanning 15 countries, with estimated annual profits in the millions. Behind the legitimate facade of modeling contracts and fashion shows lay a sophisticated trafficking operation that had operated with impunity for years. Security teams are in final position, Michael confirmed. We have coverage of all access points. Their operation included not just law enforcement, but also cybersecurity experts, former intelligence operatives, and survivors of trafficking who had become advocates. Each person had a role to play in ensuring the network's dismantling. Anya checked her reflection in the command center's window, adjusting the elegant outfit that would allow her to blend in at the showcase. Her role was crucial. As a recognized face in the fashion industry, her presence wouldn't arouse suspicion, but would allow her to move freely through the event, marking key players for the surveillance team. New development, Sophia Anderson called out from her station. Phillips just received a message from Alexander Scott. The London operation is getting nervous. Scott was another key figure in their investigation, running a parallel trafficking ring in the UK. His messages suggested the network was beginning to sense the pressure. Emma Roberts approached Anya with a final piece of equipment, a seemingly ordinary bracelet that contained a sophisticated recording device. "The survivors wanted you to wear this," she said quietly. "It belonged to one of them." The simple silver band carried the weight of countless shattered dreams, a reminder of why their mission mattered. As afternoon approached, the villa's security cameras showed the arrival of the first guests. William Robinson had taken his place in the main salon, surrounded by men whose expressions suggested they weren't there to discuss fashion. Phillips arrived shortly after, his earlier nervousness hidden behind a mask of professional confidence. Confirmation from Interpol, James Nelson announced. "Operations in Paris and London are ready to move on our signal." The investigation had grown beyond Milan, coordinating with law enforcement agencies across Europe to dismantle the entire trafficking network simultaneously. Anya felt the weight of the moment as she prepared to enter the villa. Years of building evidence, months of careful surveillance, and countless hours of testimony from brave survivors had led to this point. In her earpiece, she could hear the quiet professionalism of her team as they moved into their final positions. "Remember," Charlotte's voice was steady in her ear, "Phillips isn't the only target. We need to identify every buyer, every facilitator." The showcase would bring together not just the trafficking operations leaders, but also their wealthy clients, people who had used their influence to remain hidden while exploiting vulnerable young lives. The villa's grounds were immaculate, its Renaissance architecture a stark contrast to the modern security systems hidden within its walls. Anya ascended the marble steps, her heel clicks echoing in the afternoon air. Above, cameras tracked her progress while undercover officers posing as staff moved purposefully through the building. Inside, the villa hummed with pre-event activity. Olivia Green, still in her catering disguise, gave an imperceptible nod as she passed with a tray of champagne. In the main salon, Phillips was greeting guests, his smile never reaching his eyes as he scanned the room for any sign of threat. The next 2 hours would determine everything. Their teams were in place, their evidence secured, their strategies coordinated across 3 countries. Years of investigating fashion industry trafficking had taught them that timing was crucial, move too soon, and key players might escape, wait too long, and more young lives would be at risk. As Anya moved through the growing crowd, she noted faces that matched their investigation files. Henry Clark, a banker who facilitated the network's financial transactions, Sophia Wright, who provided false documentation for trafficking victims, William Turner, whose shipping company moved girls across borders under the guise of fashion tours. The afternoon's sun cast long shadows through the villa's ancient windows as Phillips prepared to begin his presentation. But this showcase would have a very different ending than he imagined. Justice was coming for the predators who had hidden behind the fashion industry's glamour, and Anya Taylor-Joy would help ensure that no more young dreams would be twisted into nightmares. The showcase began with the quiet confidence of a well-orchestrated performance. William Phillips stood at the villa's grand podium, his voice steady as he welcomed his prestigious guests. Behind his polished smile lay a desperation that only Anya could recognize, the subtle tremor in his hands, the too frequent glances toward the exits, the way his fingers kept brushing against his phone. Today's presentation represents the future of fashion, Phillips announced to the assembled crowd of industry elites and hidden predators. The irony of his words wasn't lost on Anya as she positioned herself near the main salon's entrance. Through her earpiece, she could hear Charlotte Anderson confirming positions, all exits covered, tactical teams in place. The villa's security cameras, now under their control, showed the full scope of the operation. In rooms upstairs, young girls recruited under false pretenses waited nervously for their debut. They had no idea that the showcase was merely a front, that the distinguished guests below were actually traffickers and their wealthy clients. But today, their innocence would be preserved. Target confirmed, Michael Turner's voice was cool and professional in Anya's ear. William Robinson just made contact with Phillips. The exchange is happening. Robinson, impeccable in his tailored suit, had passed Phillips a phone, one that would contain evidence of their entire operation once the forensics team got hold of it. The first models were being brought downstairs, their young faces bright with manufactured excitement. Emma Roberts, still maintaining her cover as a makeup artist, gave Anya a subtle signal. The girls were unharmed, just frightened and confused. Their rescue had been coordinated with precision. Each one would be safely returned to their families before sunset. Phillips was now introducing his special guests, each name a confirmation of their intelligence. "We're honored to have Henry Clark from London's premier talent," he announced, unaware that the Real Henry Clark was already in custody in London, his operation dismantled hours earlier. The man who stood and waved was actually an undercover officer, part of their international task force. Through the villa's windows, the late afternoon sun cast a golden glow that belied the tension building in the room. Anya moved carefully through the crowd, noting faces that matched their investigation files. Noah Baker, who provided false documentation, Isabella Turner, who arranged transportation, William Scott, whose banking connections laundered the operation's profits. Surveillance confirms secondary targets in position, Sophia Anderson reported through the communications system. Paris and London teams ready. The operation had grown beyond Milan, becoming a coordinated strike against trafficking networks across Europe. Years of investigation were about to culminate in a single, decisive moment. Phillips reached the crucial part of his presentation, the moment when legitimate modeling contracts would typically be discussed. Instead, he began outlining what he called private mentorship opportunities, code words that their investigation had revealed masked the true nature of his operation. Anya caught Emma's eye across the room. The makeup artist who had first brought them evidence of Phillips's crimes gave an imperceptible nod. In her years working behind the scenes of fashion shows, Emma had gathered the intelligence that made this operation possible, documenting each suspicious interaction, each young life at risk. Motion at the north entrance. Charlotte's voice was tense with controlled energy. Robinson's security team is getting nervous. The traffickers' instincts were warning them that something was wrong, but pride and greed kept them in place. They couldn't imagine that their carefully constructed world was about to crumble. Phillips was now showing photographs on the villa's massive screens, images of previous, successful placements, young girls whose disappearances had been masked by false modeling contracts. What he didn't know was that many of those same girls had come forward, their testimonies forming the backbone of the case against him. The moment of truth approached with the inevitability of a gathering storm. Anya moved closer to the podium, her presence drawing Phillips's attention. Recognition flickered in his eyes, not just of her face from magazine covers, but from the glimpses he'd caught during their surveillance operation. For the first time, real fear showed through his polished facade. Now, James Nelson's command crackled through their earpieces, and the villa erupted into coordinated action. Doors burst open simultaneously as tactical teams swarmed in, their movements precise and practiced. The guests' confusion turned to panic as they realized their elaborate facade had been penetrated. Phillips lunged for his phone, but Anya was faster. "William Phillips," she announced, her voice carrying across the now chaotic room, "you're under arrest for human trafficking, exploitation of minors, and operating a criminal enterprise." The look of disbelief on his face matched those of his associates as they realized their world was collapsing. Robinson made a break for the terrace, only to find Michael Turner waiting with a team of officers. The financial mastermind's carefully maintained dignity crumbled as he was led away in handcuffs. Around the room, similar scenes played out as buyers and facilitators found their escape routes blocked. Upstairs, Emma Roberts was already working with counselors to help the young girls understand what had happened. Each one would receive proper support, their dreams of modeling careers preserved but now guided by legitimate agencies that had partnered with their investigation. "Paris team confirms successful operation," Charlotte reported. "London simultaneously. The entire network is being dismantled." Across Europe, similar scenes were unfolding as years of careful investigation culminated in coordinated arrests. The fashion industry's darkest secret was being dragged into the light. Anya watched as Phillips was led away, his expensive suit wrinkled, his confident smile replaced by shocked defeat. Behind him, forensics teams were already moving through the villa, gathering evidence that would ensure the trafficking network's complete dissolution. Laptops, phones, and documents would reveal connections to other operations, leading to more arrests in the coming weeks. Isabella Clarke arrived with a team of survivor advocates, her presence a powerful symbol of resilience. The young model who had escaped Phillips's operation months ago now stood tall, ready to help others reclaim their lives and dreams. Her courage in coming forward had helped build the case that brought down the trafficking network. As evening fell over Milan, the villa became a hub of activity different from what Phillips had planned. Law enforcement teams processed evidence while counselors worked with the rescued girls. Legitimate modeling agents, carefully vetted by their investigation, arrived to offer real opportunities to those who still wanted to pursue fashion careers. Sophia Mitchell and her family were brought to the villa under protective escort. Their near escape from Phillips's scheme had helped set the final operation in motion. Now they watched in amazement as the true story unfolded, grateful for the intervention that had saved them from a terrible fate. The aftermath would ripple through the fashion industry for months to come. Phillips's arrest exposed not just trafficking operations, but also the systemic vulnerabilities that predators had exploited. Reform was already beginning, with major agencies implementing stricter protections for young models and improved verification of scouts and agents. Emma Roberts found Anya in the villa's garden, where the evening air carried the scent of jasmine. "It doesn't feel real yet," the makeup artist said quietly. "All those years of watching, documenting, hoping someone would believe us." Her testimony had been crucial, her careful observation having created the foundation for their investigation. Anya touched the silver bracelet she wore, the one given to her by survivors. It would be returned to them as a symbol of justice served, of power reclaimed from those who had abused it. The fashion industry had been her home, her path to success, and now she had helped ensure it would be safer for the next generation of dreamers. As night fell over Milan, the lights of police vehicles reflected off the villa's windows. Inside, teams continued gathering evidence while upstairs, young lives were being redirected toward brighter futures. The operation had succeeded beyond their expectations, not just in arrests made, but in dreams preserved and futures protected. The fashion world would wake tomorrow to headlines about the trafficking network's dismantling. But the real story would be in the quiet triumphs: young girls returning safely to their families, survivors finding their voices, and an industry beginning the hard work of reform. The predators who had hidden behind glamour and influence had finally faced justice, their power stripped away by those they had underestimated. Anya's phone buzzed with messages from other agencies, other countries where similar investigations were now gaining momentum. The fall of Phillips's network had created a blueprint for exposing trafficking operations worldwide. The work would continue, but tonight marked a crucial victory in the battle to protect young dreams from those who would exploit them.